SmackDown has had some weird moments throughout the years. There was a long period where it honestly existed just to show highlights from Raw as absolutely ridiculous. That wasn't the case in 2000 as the show was brand new and therefore a fun plaything. What's it like watching today? Well, sit down with me, Simon Miller, and let's find out. Number 10, Stephanie's title reign. If you were watching in the year 2000, you know the top angle was the McMahon-Helmsley era. They had control over the whole company, so like any promotion would do, we quickly went and made them both world champions. Easy peasy heat. What has been lost today, I suppose just due to time, is that Stephanie was really good in this role. She just existed to wind you up and be hated. After she had won the championship from Jacqueline in March, McMahon held it for 5 months before losing it to Lita, and yeah, it is just a really fun ride. Now sure, women's wrestling way back when sadly wasn't a big enough deal, but putting Steph at the forefront of it did at least mean we got some entertaining stories. It also allowed you to despise this pairing because they did run riot, so it has aged very well, all things considered. It's a good example of how sometimes, here it comes, we gotta let these things play out. Number 9, The Big Show, and how WWF did not know what to do with him. This was mad for 3 reasons, the first being Vince McMahon had claimed to everybody when Paul White was in WCW that he knew what they were doing wrong. Then he did jump ship, and it was kind of more of the same. The Big Show had also only debuted in 1999, so it's not like we've been doing this for a while. And lastly, look at the guy. We can't figure that out in wrestling? What is happening? In 2000, Sympathy seemed to be on the menu, so we made sure no matter what, Big Show was constantly bossed around by Stephanie and Triple H. I get the whole feeling pressured thing, but here we had a man that could have crushed Thunder if he wanted to. We just didn't do the best job in getting that fear across. The feud with Shane McMahon halfway through the year is great as you get some crazy bumps, but it's also there to hint that show is stupid. Again, that's not the best idea. If we are being honest, the Giant in World Championship Wrestling had a much better start with this, and while there was a lot of extenuating circumstances, you forget that now. So when we do take a step back, it just wasn't the best idea. Number 8, the odd use of Taz. Overall, WWE didn't use Taz as they should have done. He had a great debut at the Royal Rumble, which I think spooked the locker room. Everybody apparently went out of their way to bury the guy. Once again, it was stupid. Over the years, the squash match with Triple H during the April edition of SmackDown has become part of this. But when you watch it today, well, it's nowhere near as bad as some people make out. It's not the longest of matches, but the game still sells his ass off for Taz when push comes to shove, and Michael Cole is going nuts about how tough the former ECW man is. The finish also sees Tommy Dreamer accidentally hit his friend, and Triple H smacked Taz right in the balls. It's not like it's just pedigree 1, 2, 3. We did try and protect the guy. Today, people say it really harmed Taz's credibility, but that was more what we did overall, I think. You watch this match as a fan of the Man in Orange, and I think you'd be quite excited. You were wrong, but still, I think it deserves another watch. Number 7, the DX Express. On the 27th of April, The Rock welcomed Stone Cold Steve Austin back days before the Great One faced Triple H at Backlash. Austin was going to be the guest enforcer during that match, and to get people mega excited, he returned on this evening and destroyed the DX Express, which was the group's bus. Talk about seeing the future of wrestling travel. What's crazy to watch now is that when Stone Cold drops this log of concrete onto the vehicle, barely anybody sells it at all. I don't know if this was a bad edit or what have you, but the McMahons look so nonplussed. Shane almost seems confused. I think Triple H spots this because he reacts like his entire life has been ruined, and good. This has to be the way, otherwise why do the bit? You gotta sell it to death. Of course, these days people are so mad about this. Triple H is well in with the corporation at this stage, so why is he still driving around in a D-Generation X bus? Well, all I've got for you is that in wrestling lore, Vince and co must have been part of this group. Pretend I didn't say that. People just gonna get angry again. Number 6, Chyna and Eddie needed each other. This is how powerful hindsight is. Back in 2000, some hardcore fans couldn't believe that Eddie Guerrero was teaming up with Chyna, but I tell ya, this was a work of art. The Ninth Wonder of the World definitely benefited because following her Intercontinental title feud with Chris Jericho, she didn't really have much to do. For many reasons, her on-screen relationship with Triple H was also done, and I suppose Eddie was the same. He needed a proper WWF feud to get him in the office's good books, so put your hands together. It also helped establish him to a new audience, but when you go through 2000s, it's so obvious to see. This is one of those pairings that flew just because they played off each other so well. There's also a horrible sadness watching it today as both passed away way too soon. Thankfully though, we do have awesome stuff like this to keep the memory alive. Number 5, the crazy short matches. I mean, it was the Attitude Era, but even then, you forget how little match length mattered at the turn of the century. If you're only used to modern day TV, this will blow your brain, especially as most go through commercial breaks. That was not happening in 2000. It's mostly because we were far more focused on storylines and the soap opera aspects, but still. On the 6th of January SmackDown, you get Kurt Angle versus The Rock, and it goes 4 minutes. 4! And it ends in a DQ, because of course it did. The longest fight on that broadcast is Triple H versus Rikishi, which goes a whopping 7 minutes. But this was the way, as were the non-finishes. The amount of run-ins and DQs is bonkers, and some matches just end. That's right, no actual announcement, there's just a huge melee and we're done. The final nonsense though must go to the ref bumps. My gosh, the ref bumps. There's so many before long, you're confused when the referee doesn't go down. Let's definitely not go back to this, it's too much, even for an idiot like me. Number 4, the apparent creative burnout. When SmackDown was born into this world in 1999, there were no new hires. The Raw team were just told to write 2 hours of extra TV, and it's long been touted as the reason Vince Russo left. It was way too much. You still have the same cast of characters, and as Vince McMahon's legendary work ethic didn't change, all of a sudden employees were pushed to breaking point. The thing is, you do not notice this as a fan, because the product was so hot at the time that in your head you're just like, more Rock, more Austin, more Triple H, more Undertaker, hell yeah. It feels like it was an extra reason to do the brand split come 2002, as well as the death of WCW, but I tell you, for a good while they kept the ideas coming, so more power to them. 2000 is just as entertaining, if not more so, than other times in the then WWF. Mostly, everybody in front of the camera and behind the camera was just on fire. Number 3, the sheer star power. I mean, we just mentioned it. Nostalgia plays a role, of course, but still, it goes off the charts in December, as on one episode of SmackDown, you get The Rock versus The Undertaker versus Stone Cold versus Kurt Angle for the WWF title. That's right. This was due to the fact the Armageddon pay-per-view was round the corner, and as we were going to do a big 6-man Hell in a Cell there, why not just tease it all now? It sounds mad, but at the time, you wanted it. The truth is, star power matches like this were just par for the course here, because fans and announcers weren't going overly mad. This was the norm. This is what we expected. Can you imagine how an already struggling WCW felt about this too? We all know what was on the cards, but they must have already known because the tide had truly turned by this point, and World Championship Wrestling had nothing to fire back with. Let's not forget too that Angle managed to survive all of this and hold on to his championship into 2001. I loved it back then, and I love it now. Number 2, the bizarre start to the Radicalz. This was huge. Perry Saturn, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, and Dean Malenko jumping to the WWF at the same time. Even when it was first teased, nobody could believe it. 4 up-and-coming talents, all deciding to move to pastures new. We did give them the big hoo-ha as Mick Foley was the guy who introduced them, which brings us to February. We've already established Triple H was in charge on the TV, so he did indeed promise these guys contracts if they could win 2 out of 3 matches tonight. Ruh-roh. Now you think we would have done the obvious, but we did not. Instead, the Radicalz lost all of these, as X-Pac defeated Dean, the New Age Outlaws beat Eddie and Perry, whereas Benoit couldn't get the job done against Hunter. What a bunch of losers. It was classic Vince McMahon in the sense the WCW guys had to prove they would accept not winning, but it did not help. Guerrero and Benoit eventually found their way, but Malenko and Saturn must have known. They were correct. Before long, one of them was in love with a mop and the other was James Bond. Everybody then started to tell them they couldn't cut it in the big leagues, and this was so ridiculous, we just made things overly difficult. Why we don't do the obvious things from time to time, I don't know. It's too easy, I suppose. Then they're gonna have real problems, so I don't care. Number 1, you can't help but watch. This is the biggest takeaway from all 52 episodes. Much like Super Hands, it is incredibly Moorish. It really does tie into what any good TV show needs to offer, because as soon as you've watched one episode of SmackDown, you move on instantly and even check Raw to fill in the gaps. Everything was just so damn compelling. The classic 2-hour format is just the best for wrestling too, and given these days you watch it without adverts, man, they just fly by. It's why you always want to keep going. It's basically drugs. The WWE were also super into cliffhangers back then, and while they would eventually get overdone, they still work here. So all in all, you can start to tell why everybody was so up on the product at the time. They had a format down. Before they did run it into the ground, well, it was pretty damn good. You know any other things we need to talk about back in the day from 2000 SmackDown? Let me know in the comments below before you like the video, share the video, and subscribe. And if you want to hear about another year, click the video on the screen right now. Otherwise, make sure you have a lovely, happy day, my friends. And I will talk to you on the next one.